Welcome to the Alcohol Free Life podcast, brought to you by thesoberclub.com. I'm Janey Grace. This is for you if you've quit the booze or you'd like to, or maybe you're just sober curious. I'll bring you tips and motivation without any judgment, and there'll be inspiration from experts, quit-lit authors, and sober heroes. Hi and welcome to the Alcohol Free Life podcast. I just want to say a big hi before we really get going to those people who've been listening to this show for absolutely ages. Somebody said to me the other day they've listened to every episode. That's impressive. Wow, given that I haven't had a week off in, I don't know, what is it? 4 years. It must be 4 years. Oh my goodness. Wow. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And those of you who are brand new to the podcast, you're really welcome. And obviously you can go back and listen through the archives. If you do that, I'd love to know some of your favourite episodes, and then maybe we can pick a clip from them every now and then, or even get the guests back. You know, I have no problem with interviewing people for a second time, you know, if they're fabulously interesting. So yeah, it'd be lovely to know what your favourite episodes are. And also just a reminder, if you rate this podcast, it would be so helpful if you'd share it, if you'd rate it, review it on the platform you listen to it, all that stuff. You know, you give it stars and write something nice, and it makes a really big difference. And there is also, you can also buy me a coffee. There's that website, buymeacoffee.com. I mean, honestly, I'd much prefer that we meet up and have a real one. But if that's not possible, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Janey Lee Grace. And then maybe we will get to meet up in real life as well. I will tell you a bit about a couple of events that we've got coming up later on. This week's guest, I seem to have had a run of fascinating, amazing guys who are just doing some incredible work around men's mental health. And I mean, you know, an area that's just, it's just so important, it's so needed. And I'm so pleased today that I'm going to be chatting to Sam Delaney, a proper Jack the Lad in his own, or so he says, at least to start with. He hosts The Reset, which is a podcast where he chats to guests about mental health and recovery. And what I really like about Sam is that, you know, as I say, he called himself Jack the Lad. Everything was about the banter and the antics, which he called bantics. And, you know, so he was a confident guy, a loud, funny guy, a legend. But really that was all a pretense, you know, of course it was. And like so many guys who seemed to be fine, he actually wasn't fine. So turned to drugs and drink, and really knew he needed help. And as Sam says in his book, he thought that self-help was for hippies, sobriety was for weirdos, and therapy was for neurotics. That really sums up how so many people still feel, doesn't it? But he obviously has got better. Now he shares his story with other people. And the book is Sort Your Head Out. It's a really great, compassionate book that is for everyone, really. But I'm going to be chatting to Sam about what's been going on. You might have heard him in the media. He's been doing loads of radio interviews, loads of stuff across the media. He's quite well known because he's a journalist and broadcaster. He's featured in The Guardian, The Telegraph, Talk Sport, and he's the former editor-in-chief of Heat Mag as well. So you may have heard him speaking before, but we have a really good discussion, I think you'll find, on mental health, on sobriety, on whether, you know, you're getting to rock bottom. There's some interesting stuff in there. But before we do any of that, I just wanted to share that we've teamed up with Talonmore Drinks company this week. Now, I came across Talonmore must have been last year. They're a Scottish-based family-run business founded in 2020, and really lovely bottles. And the name, if you're thinking, what does that mean? It's the strength of an eagle. That's where the name derives from. And they wanted that particularly because they're really in touch with the land's natural ingredients, and for them the eagle's head symbolises power and freedom, which is of course what sobriety is all about, I think you'll find. And when it comes to alcohol-free drinks, of course. It's all in the way they're made and using brewing methods of manufacture rather than distilling. Talonmore have got this just amazing, unique beverage that replicates the experience of drinking a dark spirit. So many people say to me, oh, I used to really like my whiskey, or I used to like my dark spirits, and I can't replicate that. Well, actually you can. Talonmore is 0% ABV and brewed with Scottish water. And what I love about it is it's healthy. It's got key superfoods in there as well: ginger, prickly pear, hawthorn berry, assam tea, which have recognised health benefits in their own right. And then they're combined with this kind of full-bodied, fiery taste that replicates that kind of kick that you get from alcohol. If you remember the old days, you get that kick before it all goes bad. So this is warm and fiery, and you've got that lovely kind of gingery cinnamon flavour, complemented with malty notes and sweetness. It's just such a unique, really lovely drink. And you can have it neat, you can have it on the rocks or with a mixer, or of course you can have it as part of an alcohol-free cocktail. And the really good news is that now they've got these new bottles. The 70cl batch has got an upgraded label. They've got their red foil, their glass bottle, and they really care about the environment because their packaging, their cap, all fully recyclable. But now you can also try them in mini bottles. And this is something that people ask me for all the time. So I don't really want to spend a lot of money on a bottle of something that I might not like. So now you've got the opportunity to explore before you buy the full size, as it were. So you can get these packs of 4 times 50cl of the non-alcoholic spirit. So fantastic product. And we have a competition. Very grateful to this brand. They've got a bottle of Talonmore non-alcoholic spirit to give away worth $22.95. So if you go over to the show notes for this podcast or thesoberclub.com, and we'll divert you to the competition. Got to be in it to win it. And check them out, talonmoredrinks.com. Promised I'd mention a couple of events that we've got coming up. If you are, I've mentioned a few times, and I know it's not for everyone, but if you are a coach or a therapist, or you would like to add sober coach training to your portfolio of what you do, or if you're not a coach yet, but it's something you would like to think about, then drop me a message, have a look at some of the stuff on the Sober Club. And we've got a free webinar on Wednesday evening, Wednesday 1st of March, 8 p.m. There's a free kind of Zoom session where I'm just going to talk through what it means to be a sober coach. So if that's something that you might be interested in, you can do the training for your personal development as well. So there's a few options, but come and join us if you're interested in that. You have to register for it. So again, you'll find the link at thesoberclub.com, or just drop me a message. I'm very easy to find on social media at Janey Lee Grace. And for absolutely everyone, we have a Sober by the Sea event. Well, I guess you've got to be in the UK and be able to get to us. And it's Saturday, March the 11th. And we create a vision board. It's a really fabulous way of looking at what it is you want, kind of manifesting what you really want for your life. So it'd be great if you could join us for that. It's one day, great connection, very small group, lovely lunch, stroll by the sea, create a vision board, a one-to-one coaching session included. I mean, what's not to like, really? So Saturday, March the 11th, if that's something that you can make. And then Family Constellations, we will have another one, April the 15th, I think is the date we've got, Saturday, April the 15th. That will be in Hertfordshire. And there'll be an online one as well. Family Constellations feels just so important at the moment. I mean, it always is, but it feels so important at the moment because just so much is coming up for people, I think, around various traumas that they're carrying, limiting beliefs. Don't get confused into thinking that trauma is just the really big stuff, which you might consider yourself super lucky that you've been thrown clear of, which is great. But we've all got these little traumas. I talk about this in the interview with Sam coming up. And I've heard people say so often, actually for me, because we talk a lot about the social pressure, don't we, of going out and being sober shamed and that sort of pressure into thinking you've got to start drinking again. But for some people, actually, it isn't the social pressure at all. This stuff happens at home. It happens just within your own head. And it's really common where people say, actually going out isn't an issue for me. I'm good having an alcohol-free beer or whatever it is I'm having, or I pick up I take something with me, or I have my Talonmore or whatever it is when I get home. But the issue for me is when I'm on my own, or when I'm away with the kids are away, or my partner's not around, or I find myself on my own after a long day at work, then I've got this conversation going on in my head, and I can't seem to fight that addictive voice in my head. And this is so real for a lot of people. And I think that what can often happen is we just get ourselves into this state where we have a conversation with ourselves, and we just say, oh, just, sod it. What difference does it really make? I deserve it. And we've got these associations, these long-standing associations with the fact that we believe that alcohol fixes everything. Alcohol will make us feel better, will, just take away the unpleasant thoughts. And, well, yeah, I guess it will in a sense if it makes you completely numb. But at what price? And rather than actually valuing ourselves and recognizing that if we were someone who cared about ourselves, we wouldn't be doing that, because ultimately it's a form of self-harm. And this is just such a massive step for many people. It definitely was for me, because as I've said so many times, I definitely did not value myself. In the Sober Club this week, we've been doing our self-love challenge, just little bite-sized meditations and various bits of content that have been encouraging people to just start to become curious about what it might feel like to actually like yourself. How would you act differently if you liked yourself? How would you set boundaries in a different way if you were someone who really valued yourself? And maybe the word self-love is a bit too strong, but you can start by appreciating yourself and choosing not to self-harm, which is ultimately what pouring the alcohol in is going to be. Right? So if there's some of this resonates with you, just check out the Sober Club, join us, and it's super cheap, and you get all these incredible resources and support from other people going through the same thing, because ultimately, whether you stop drinking or not, this is going to be the piece that is almost certainly going to lie behind whatever unease and imbalance you may be feeling. So, definitely worth having a think about the self-love piece. I think you've probably heard me say that a few times, right? Enjoy this interview. My guest is Sam Delaney, and I love this book. It's just so great, Sam. Thank you for being so completely refreshing, talking about mental health and men's mental health. And it couldn't be more refreshing, really, could it, than your title, which is Sort Your Head Out, Mental Health Without All the Bollocks. I mean, that's kind of it, isn't it, really? It does what it says on the tin.
Yeah, it does. So, a mate of mine convinced me to use that sort of subline. Without all the bullets, because I'd use that a lot on my podcast, which is about mental health. And I said, "Oh no, publisher will never go for it." And he said, "Well, never mind the bollocks. Sex Pistols was like over 40 years ago
exactly.
now." He went, "So I think the British public will write it." So I said, "Oh, yeah, actually, I mean, it is good because it's like does what it says on the tin." And so I'm happy with it. But on when I've been on the BBC promoting it, for example, no one can say the full title. And so sometimes I think, oh, maybe I should have thought it through, but never mind.
No, I think it's good because we know what we're going to get from this book, basically, from that title, and that's a good thing. And I'm guessing you're going to tell me that, particularly for guys, that really is a good thing. So let's just take you back then and just share a little bit of your dim and distant past and what led to all of this. Just tell us a little bit about you, kind of early days, as it were.
Okay, so I grew up as like the youngest of four brothers with a single parent family, quite a rough and tumble environment, lots of drinking and banter and football and all of that sort of stuff. And that was the sort of character that I kind of felt comfortable being, a kind of a Jack the Lad. And drink was always a big part of that. And I always say, like, I was part of the Lad Mag generation. I kind of went on to actually make a living out of working for them when I first started as a journalist. And what that was about was taking nothing seriously, least of all yourself, right? Yeah. So the worst crime was to sort of take yourself remotely seriously. And so that meant no looking inwards, no reflection, get on with it, and there's no problem that can't be solved by a night out with the lads and a few pints. So I saw that kind of life as fairly benign and almost always enjoyable. But when I reached my late 30s, having never been always doing that thing when it came to drinking of comparing yourself to your peers, and I always say I was never in the top kind of elite members of the drinking club. I wasn't even in the follow-up. You know, to put it in football terms, I was not a Champions League drinker. I wasn't even a Europa League drinker. I was right down the pecking order amongst all of my drinking peers. But as I reached, so I never thought, in comparison to other people, that I had a problem. But when I got into my late 30s, I started to just feel really overwhelmed and overstretched by life. It was this sort of combined pressures of work life and family life, and maintaining my sort of social life and the kind of image I projected within that. It was a lot. And it was no more than, you know, lots of men and women have to do, that's for sure. So I wasn't anything unusual. But what I didn't do, and I regret, is that I never felt able to tell anyone that I was starting to get extremely stressed, sometimes depressed, and often, almost always, extremely anxious all the time. Worrying,
so it's just a kind of mask that you were wearing, really.
Yeah, I hid behind the mask that I'd always worn, which had been pretty authentic for years. I had been a bit of a happy-go-lucky Jack the lad. And then suddenly something inside just clicked. And I think in retrospect, it was just the exhaustion and the overwhelm of the responsibilities that I had taken on, as you do accumulate as you get older. And, you know, I wanted to be a fantastic dad. I wanted to be a great husband. I wanted to continue to be ambitious and hardworking in my career. And I wanted to carry on being a legend down the pub on a Saturday after the game. You know, I wanted all of those things, but it was too much, especially if you weren't really spending any time reflecting or taking care of yourself. So to cut a long story short, I guess what happened was all of these feelings built up inside. I was too ashamed to admit to them because I thought I'd sound like a whinger and a moaner. So I kept them inside. I thought I was the only one going through this kind of experience. So I was very negative about myself. I was full of shame. And I was just ashamed. And I started to self-medicate using drink and drugs. And I was very secretive about it, i.e. you'd still see me in the pub having a laugh with the lads, but I wouldn't really seem out the ordinary to anyone else. But I was also spending a lot of time on my own, drinking in the day, taking drugs in the day, holding down a very responsible job, but getting pretty out of it on the sly, hiding it from everyone around me. And that went on for about 18 months to 2 years before I reached a point where I reached out for help and sought some therapy.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things in what you've just said. You know, number one, isn't it interesting how we kind of use that phrase, you know, I forget the exact phrase you use, but basically along the lines of, you know, I'm not good as the other lads if I can't hold my beer, kind of thing. It's this kind of concept that we have to be able to drink copious amounts of toxic liquid before we're seen as cool. It's bonkers, isn't it? It's absolutely bonkers. The other thing that I think is really interesting, you know, reading the beginning of your book, you really I think stress that you didn't have an unhappy childhood. You know, you had your fair share of knocks and stuff as kids do, but you know, you made it clear that you felt loved. You know, your mum, that comes across quite clearly, actually, that you definitely felt loved as a kid. So just before we dig into all the other stuff, I'm just really interested. Have you ever kind of asked yourself what might have made the difference, if you see what I mean? So I suppose what I'm getting at is, you know, the essence of what we're saying is you didn't do any of that looking within, you know, because most of us don't. Blokes certainly don't, do they? So you didn't do any of that looking within or self-reflection, or you just allowed, you know, the stress just piled on and piled on and piled on. So what might have made the difference? Because in your case, it wasn't that there was massive trauma there. I mean, we know that there's trauma with a big T and trauma with a little t, but there wasn't that huge, massive childhood trauma that one might say, oh my God, it's obvious you need to go to counselling or whatever. So you never hit that place. So what might have made a difference for you?
I think that really one of the biggest points that I'm trying to make in this book is that all of us, all human beings, you know, have been through a lot of experiences, knocks, cuts, bruises along the way. And it's really important to sort of honor that and observe it and understand what has happened to you in your life.
Yeah.
And put aside this idea that the only people with the right to sort of seek help or feel pain are those who have had what, you know, we as a society would, you know, sort of categorize as serious major trauma, i.e. sexual abuse,
exactly,
or the death of a parent at an early age, or et cetera, et cetera. You know, a phrase that I heard once in group therapy that I was really sort of registered with me was, it's not the elephants that kill you, it's the ants.
Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
So the thing is, if you have something big, and in the end I had something big, which was an alcohol addiction and a drug addiction, and that was in many ways a gift, which I'm sure is something that you know, a lot of people say on this podcast. It was a gift because, you know, my story was, I was loved in my childhood, but my childhood was extremely chaotic, right? So my dad left before I was even, you know, when I was a baby, so I don't remember. And we were kind of left in the lurch, and my mum really struggled to sort of hold it all together. And, you know, we lived on a council estate, and then in a sort of a little council house by the motorway. And my mum was always trying to work full time, so I was often home alone, and my brothers were quite rebellious. So although I never lacked love, and even my dad, who was absent, I knew he loved me. You know, I would see he was a weekend sort of a dad, you know, so it wasn't like I felt unloved. I did feel out of place. I felt disconnected from him. My brothers were all older than me. I felt disconnected from them. There was not much stability. There was different boyfriends of my mum's coming in and out of the house. The house was a mad place. And so I think that inside I had a sort of a real kind of sense of constantly being on alert.
Exactly. You wouldn't feel safe.
I felt lonely and sort of unsafe, but I did feel loved. You know, I didn't feel that. So that was the thing. So, and then there were small things along the way. And then if you combine those issues with the cultural conditioning I had as a lad, which is don't show any pain,
emotion,
constantly pretend to be okay. Not just show that, it's not so much don't show emotion. It's like actually go out your way to show almost incessant, positive, upbeat emotion. That was the person that I was and projected. And to be honest with you, I believed it myself for many years. I thought, it's quite good. I see other people struggling and being sad, and sometimes I feel sorry for them, or sometimes I'm a bit sneering and judgy about them. But I'm lucky because I'm always having a laugh and making people laugh, and I'm laughing all the time. And then like it all gets on top, which it does for anyone. And I suppose what I'm trying to say to any reader of my book is you're allowed to feel pain. You're allowed to show yourself a little bit of kindness and sympathy, right? You're allowed to sometimes look back on the little bits in your life that caused you pain, but that you covered up to yourself and others, and think, actually, I did quite well to get through that, you know. And there's so many people, because trauma is a big word, and we're surrounded now more than ever by stories of people who have been through awful things, more than I could ever imagine. That there's people and then there's other people, the lucky few, who might genuinely be able to maintain a level of contentment most of the time in their life, although I think that those people are very rare.
Well, so do I,
But there's a big group in the middle of people who've just had the experience of being a human being, which is tough. And if you don't acknowledge that, you're going to be pushed into the arms of something. And in my case, it was drink and drugs. With other people, it could be anything. You know, it could be relationships or eating or whatever. But eventually, if you're not actually confronting it and processing it, I believe you will be ripe and vulnerable to fall into some form of bad habit.
Absolutely.
To sort of try and distract yourself, you know.
I totally agree. There's and that phrase is exactly right, because, you know, it is, you know, the big trauma is huge, but, you know, but as you say, it's the little things, it's the ants, isn't it? And there's the again, another lovely phrase in the work that I do with something called matrix reimprinting, which sounds very fancy, and family constellations, is just this lovely phrase. It's not what happens to you, it's what you made it mean.
None of us can
Yes.
change those things that happen to us, big or
Yeah.
small, but it's what we made it mean. And obviously when you were a kid, some things would have happened to you that you made mean something, and
Yeah.
certainly at some point you would have made a decision. Okay, I'm going to put a brave face on everything. I'm going to
Yeah.
be Jack the lad forever.
Yeah,
kind
that
of
was
thing.
what I can see now, that I kind of was in the process of writing this book. I did sort of think quite a lot in detail about my my childhood when I was still at primary school.
Yeah.
And the sort of identities that I was caught between. So, for instance,
Yeah.
I had a very different identity at weekends with my dad to the one that I would have had at home with my mum and my brothers, right? I just literally, I almost spoke in a different voice, right? And I've actually found, by speaking to, since I did this book, speaking to other men who were from similar backgrounds, who had a dad who left, that it was very common to do that. You sort of are trying to do these two different personas. And I was, maybe I was at school, you're caught between being different types of bloke. Like, I was reasonably smart at school. So particularly, with things like English and art, the teachers would sort of praise me. And so on the one hand, I'd quite warm to that. But on the other hand, I kind of wanted to be a tearaway. I sort of wanted to be a bit of a rebel.
I want to be the rebel, yeah.
That fitted into a sort of a different kind of image I had, where I wanted to be sort of tough and rebellious,
Yeah.
And so searching around for something, I think in the end, I actually made a conscious decision to think, in early adolescence, no, I'm going to be a lad, because they're funny and they're charismatic and nothing bothers them. And I think we all learn as kids as well to pretend to be okay.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
It's really weird, because the older I get, the more I realize you pretend to be okay sometimes to please your parents.
Oh God, yeah. I remember that. I remember
your parents are actually making you upset sometimes, or life shit.
Yeah.
And they go, "Are you all right?" And all you ever say to your parents is, "I'm fine." Because I don't want to make you feel bad.
Yeah, I remember being really badly bullied when I was a kid, and there was something going on actually outside my house. If I remember now, this vague memory of it. It was absolutely awful. But my overriding memory is that the only thing I could think of was I couldn't bear it if my parents heard. Couldn't bear them to have to feel the upset and shame. So I needed to carry it for them. I wasn't even upset myself. It was just the absolute horror of them hearing it. Right.
Yeah, it's so strange.
And that's what kids do, isn't it?
And your parent, and now as a parent, I always am trying to make sure my kids are okay. And they often, and it's this weird thing where a kid will reassure you, and it should be the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. And children try to carry it for their parents.
Sometimes I see it. I see it with my own kids, and then I feel awful. I think they're trying to reassure me about this situation. They don't want me to feel sad or worried.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, what I was getting at when I was saying what might have made it different. I suppose this is exactly it. What we're talking about now is if there's more awareness for kids, about accepting and noticing emotions, it would change everything.
Yes,
wouldn't it? If kids were allowed to feel a range of emotions, and you know what, we all have a whole range of emotions. They're not all fabulous. Sometimes we feel angry, sad, jealous, guilty, whatever the hell it is. And you know what, it will pass, but we can sit with it, we can acknowledge it, we can share it, we can be open about it,
and it's not a failure to feel those things. I think when you put it like that, I kind of think, I think I probably thought that sadness or fear, insecurity, shame, those were all failures. I was like, I'm failing at life here, because I would look at other people who I'd sort of look up to. I suppose I'd look at my dad, and he would never, it's a classic sort of dad, especially of his generation. He's a really kind guy, my dad, but he would, he carried himself with this thing that nothing bothered him. And that actually getting sad or being, his sort of point of view seems to be getting sad or feeling low or any of those things was almost just like you were being irrational.
Yeah, sign of weakness.
And in his world, being irrational is like really like something to be ashamed of. If you're not, so like there was no room for, but all emotions are kind of irrational, aren't they? That's the difference between your brain and your heart. Yeah. And, I don't blame him, because that was the way he'd probably been raised, right? Yeah. And actually, really, you end up feeling quite sorry for parents when you realise they're like that, the older generation, because you think, that's just part of how they were raised, and they can't. And I look at my parents' lives, and to be honest, they went through a lot more than me. I mean, my dad's been divorced twice, but my mum's been through like genuine traumas.
Yeah.
But they would never face up to that. Really, not really. You know, they'd be really ashamed to say that it affected them negatively.
Yeah.
They want to tell the world that they, you know, it was bad, but what do? You move on. Now, of course, kids get taught a lot more about mental health at school. My kids are always, you know, they got it coming out of their ears. The mental health
good.
stuff.
That's good.
That's very good. But one word that I hear coming up a great deal at the school is the notion of resilience. And I'm not sure how I feel about that, because what you just said made more sense to me.
Sit with the emotions. Absolutely.
Emotions, whereas resilience sometimes to me
put
sounds
a brave
like
face on.
Suck it up.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. I mean, I think, you know, that what is good about all of this is, you know, sometimes because of the work I do in family constellations, when I very first went to a family constellations workshop, I remember hearing, you know, all of this stuff, seeing people's trauma played out, and thinking to myself, oh my God, I've got 4 kids. Oh God, what have I done to them? They're all going to be so messed up.
Right? Oh God, yeah.
But the good news is, you know, the more work you do, the less they have to do. You know, so you write in this book, you talking about this stuff, that's such an incredible gift for them, because that means now that cycle can be broken. And that's what's so lovely about it. It really can.
My son's 11 and he's watched some of the interviews I've done, you know, and I said to my wife, because like I've gone off to do a couple of TV things and they've watched at home. And I said, how did he feel about that? Did you check? Because I'm not sure, you know, especially when you're talking about things like drink and drugs. And she said that he was really just excited and enthusiastic about me being on there and articulating it. And I felt that my daughter, I'm not sure, she's 15. And so I'm worried with her that she'll be like, oh God, what about my mates and all of this stuff? But I've talked to her a lot about it. And I talked to them a lot before the book came out. And said to them, look, just so you know, I'll be writing about this. And they knew that I hadn't drunk, and they sort of knew that I hadn't drunk since they were very small, because I think they had the impression that I probably just was drinking too much, and that's why I decided to stop. But I had to go, well, actually, there was drugs and blah, blah, blah.
It's good though, isn't it? Because it's honest. And you know what? Whatever kids have to face, if parents are completely authentic, there's a real beauty in that. And some of that will have rubbed off on them. So I really do think, you know, I think it's great that you're talking about it. It's brilliant. Anyways, tell me a bit more about the so when you had your kind of wake up call, your light bulb moment, what how did you reach out? What did you do to change what was going on?
Well, I remember the exact moment. It was the middle of the night and I was wide awake, not for the first time by any means. You know, drink and drugs would keep me awake and frantic and riddled with panic and self-hatred in the dead of night while my wife was asleep next to me and my kids were asleep in the next room. And I was lying there once again, having tried and failed for the umpteenth time to quit these bad habits, because I was way past really wanting them to continue. And that's how when people say, oh, how do you know when you've got a problem or you're an addict or whatever? I said, well, you know, people have got different definitions. For me, it's like, if your biggest desire is to stop drinking, and yet you continuously drink anyway and then feel shit about it afterwards, that to me, I was just about rational enough to think, well, this is a severe problem, because every day, my biggest dream was to stop drinking and taking drugs. And yet every day I broke the promise to myself and the promise to my wife, because my wife had, although I was secretive, by this stage, she was very aware of the drinking, if not the drugs. And so I was there in the middle of the night, and I think it was a stage of, I would literally do anything at this stage, right? If someone told me, if someone had a magic wand to help me stop doing this. And I'd never, for all the reasons I've said, the whole kind of cynical Jack the Lad, don't take anything seriously. The idea of therapy had always been anathema to me. I thought, oh no, that's for navel gazers or hippies, and it's weird, and there's psychobabble and all of that, all those prejudices that lots of people have, particularly someone like me. I was like, it's a load of old rubbish, that kind of nonsense. But what I did was I Googled in the dead of night, because I just couldn't sleep. I Googled lying in bed on my phone, the Priory. because the Priory was the only rehab place
everyone knows about.
Everyone knows. The other thing is, it's really near my house, so I drove past it all the time, right? And I thought it's walking distance, and I've heard of it. And they said there was like a free assessment, so I signed up for it there and then at probably like 3 a.m. in the morning. Finally got off to sleep and probably thought to myself, I'm never going to do this. But actually, I got a personal email from the sort of counsellor there the next day.
Right.
Saying, I've seen this. Are you still interested? Blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, it's not automated. I thought it'd all be automated. So I said, yeah. I remember I was in the office at work and I went, yeah, I will come. And I was I was almost like, when the email came through, I was almost like putting my arms around my computer screen because I felt so like ashamed.
So exposed. Yeah.
And it was so touch and go. It's probably the biggest sliding doors moment in my entire life because it was completely touch and go about whether I actually went or not. And I on the day it came about, I happened not to be in the office. I was at home. I hadn't told my wife, hadn't told anyone. And I just jumped in the car. And I think part of it was like journalistic curiosity. I've always been a journalist and I do sometimes genuinely go into things, and in the past, very bad things, almost out of curiosity to think, I've always heard about this, or I've read about it in books, I've seen it in movies. I wonder what it's really like. So I went there out of that part.
Yeah.
And I met this woman and she just gave a free assessment. We sat there for about, 45 minutes. And she told me to tell her everything that I'd done, in terms of drinking and drug taking over the past just 7 days. And I was very honest. And she said a number of things that had a big impact. But one of them was, listen, okay, I think it's clear that you've got a problem. If you want to give up completely, we can help you. If you're looking to just cut down, I'm sorry, we can't help you. There's nothing. And I said, oh, wow. And it was very clear. It was completely clear. And I said, right, okay. And she went, so what I suggest you is go off and think about that and then come back if you decided that you are serious and you want to stop for good. And, there was more to the conversation than that. But I can tell you I left, and in the car on the way home, 10-minute drive home, I'd already decided. I loved the fact that she'd said that because I'm an all or nothing person, like a lot of addicts are. And I thought, oh, yeah, I can really get behind that. I wasn't expecting that. But she's saying quit for good, forever, a unilateral decision. And I thought, that's the sort of thing that I'm quite good at. And I haven't had it. That was the last day I can't even remember if I'd had a drink that day, the morning before I might have done because I was drinking in the day at that time. But I certainly have never had a drink since that. And that was like 7.5 years ago.
Right.
And
so did you actually go to the rehab?
I didn't go. No, I didn't go as an inpatient. She offered me that and I just couldn't commit to it. Well, partly because I couldn't afford it
as well, isn't it?
I couldn't afford it. I mean,
expensive.
I was broke as a result, really, of my addictions. I was broke, and also I just like it was for me with the kids and everything. I was just like, I need to try and do this another way.
Yeah,
but I carried on going back there weekly, and at certain periods, like 2 or 3 times weekly, to group meetings and one-to-one sessions with her. And she actually remains my therapist to this day. She's no longer at the Priory.
Right.
But she had a big impact on me because she was a former addict herself. Yeah. She was very open about that right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And for me as well, she was great because she was really smart and knew her stuff. And she was obviously very well qualified. But she told me that she'd been an addict herself and said right at the beginning, listen, tell me everything, and I can tell you that however bad you think it is, I've probably done worse.
Heard it before,
right? And I thought, but she said, I personally would have done worse.
Right.
I don't know for certain. She went, but there's not many things I didn't do.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay. And she also, like, it's little things. She swore in our meeting. Yeah. Now, to me, that went a long way, I think, looking back. And I think that's why I think this stuff's all to do with language. I don't think, you can read back to like the Stoics or Plato in ancient Greece, or you can listen to a fantastic podcast like this one, or get a brand new self-help book from Waterstones. The stuff that people are saying is very often the same.
Yeah.
It's all true and it all makes sense and it all works. The only difference in my book or whatever all of us are doing is just keep saying it in different ways and different languages so it connects with different people.
Got to make it relatable.
That's what my book is. I've just I know that there's guys like me going through similar things I did, and it's for them. If other people read it too, then great, I'll be delighted. But I'm just trying to tell the same story in a different language, really.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, how long have you been sober now then?
7.5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'll be 8 years in June. Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't it amazing how just every year it gets better? You know, there's not that kind of flat thing. It's just, I absolutely love that. I just think it's amazing. So what happened for you then when you had to effectively step into a new identity? Because that's exactly what you would have had to have done. Really step into this new identity of who you really are. Which, I'm sure there's still plenty of positivity and fun, but you ain't the same guy, right? So how did you navigate that? Because people can find that, I find in my community that can sometimes floor people because for starters, often people will find that they are not the person they thought they were. They thought they were really extrovert and completely, party gal, party guy, but actually they're really quite introvert or even highly sensitive. So we have to kind of find I call it stepping into your sober shoes. Yeah. And there's a little bit of recalibration to be done there, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a lot. And I mean, I look back on my first 2-3 years of sobriety and think, oh my God, I was really quite mad. Right. I really was. I mean, I threw myself into work to an extent where I kind of wound up burning out all over again, you know. And
so was that in order to avoid social stuff?
I realize that now. No, I think socially, I did go to ground a little bit for about, let's say, 6 months or something. I moved my sit football. By that stage in my life, a lot of my social life, because I had 2 kids, it wasn't like I was out clubbing.
Sure, no.
I was doing it, but my main social life revolved around going to football. I'd been going to football to watch West Ham with the same group of lads since I was an adolescent, right?
Yeah.
And that always surrounded football, drinking. And I distanced myself from that a bit. I carried on going to the football, but I switched seats. And I think, a couple of mates might have thought that was a bit weird or resented it a bit, but they didn't realize at the time why I'd done it, because I was playing down my sobriety. Yeah. Like, I was being honest that I was sober, but when people asked, I was just sort of going, I'm
just off it for a while. Yeah.
Go. I'm sleeping better, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to discuss it or confront it. And, but then slowly I started kind of reintegrating with mates and finding that me personally, I know it's not the same for everyone, I was still able to go to the pub to see them and have a non-alcoholic drink.
Yeah.
And I was still able to join in the banter and have a laugh. Yeah. And lucky for me, I found that no friends really gave a shit, to be honest. I mean, there was a couple of incidents with mates who to be honest, I kind of ditched on the spot without telling them. I was like, that's that.
There's usually some, isn't there, who you were only with them because you were drinking, and that's the only reason.
Well, there was that. I had a couple of mates who were very much, they were drinking and we were doing drugs together. And that was what the friendship was based around. Yeah. And it was easy for me to distance myself. And they were pretty, kind of, if I think about some of the comments they made were a bit sort of dismissive of what I was doing, which I realise, in retrospect, is their own issues sort of thing, because they might have felt judged or whatever.
Sure.
And then I had another friend, an old friend from university. And I remember I was only like about 4 months sober. We all went out in a kind of reunion thing. And I just remember her really calling me out in front of everyone and saying, I'm not accepting this. What happened? And my wife said, obviously something's happened and I want to know what it is. And you're hiding something and you've got a problem or you've done something. And anyway, the funny thing about that night was it was really upsetting, and I almost left the get together and was sort of talked back into staying. But the funny thing about that night was I remember her in the middle of this rant, she was so pissed herself that she fell off a chair, sprawled on the pub floor, and then just got up and disappeared. And I don't think I've ever seen her since, because I was really upsetting, and it sort of informed a lot. I've been on a journey way beyond just not drinking,
absolutely.
A big human journey, an emotional journey, and changed the way that I act towards other people a huge amount.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot just about being sensitive towards other people and their choices, which, to be honest, was a negative part of the Jack the Lad image, where you sort of have a kind of an arrogance. You carry yourself as if you know it all.
Yeah.
And but those things that I mentioned, they're very isolated. For the most part, 90% of everyone I hung around with was kind of accepting, but not in a, oh, we think you're doing great, mate, well done. Just in a sort of totally indifferent, which is kind of what I wanted at that time.
That's what you want. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Because, you know, there's no doubt when you first sort of get out and about, the fact that you've, you know, can shine a light on what's going on for other people. Clearly, you know, it's all being reflected back. But you're right as well in that if friends are your true mates, it doesn't really matter what you're putting in your mouth, does it? Well, why would it matter? You know, really.
I mean, I'm lucky. Some people, of course, don't like going to pubs at all, or they don't like being around drunken people. I've continued, so, you know, I had a launch party for my book the other day. There was quite a few people. There was an open bar for the first couple of hours. Quite a few people very tipsy. It really doesn't bother me, but I'm much stricter with just the way I just do things on my own terms more now. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I try not to be selfish as such, but I guess I am a bit more selfish.
Well, I don't know if it's selfish though, is it? Isn't it more about self-care? You know, because you actually sort of, I know it's, you know, you're able to actually look at yourself and like yourself a bit when you stop drinking, and you can actually bring in that sense of self-esteem. So you know what good self-care is. And good self-care is setting boundaries, right?
Yeah,
which I bet you didn't have any of before.
No, you turn up to things, you have a couple of drinks, then you just leave. You don't care. Exactly. You don't dwell on, oh, maybe people will think I'm boring, or maybe people will think that. If anything, I think, well, I feel more confident than the other people in the room a lot of the time. Totally, and I'm very able, when people say, do you want to do this? I'm very able, with a smile on my face, go, no. And then people go, oh, why not? And I go, I don't want to. Yeah, and I'll do it with a joke. And I just don't.
Saying no is an actual act of self-care. It really is.
It really is. And I also think it's so funny as well that you kind of like, I used to care so much about not being perceived as boring. Yeah. And now I celebrate it when I'm being boring.
Well, except that actually, you know, it's not true, is it? You know, it's actually drunk people that are boring, that woman you mentioned. That's what's really boring. Exhaustingly boring. And actually, when people are sober and they have become all of who they are, then, you know, that is a really rich tapestry usually.
Yeah, absolutely.
So look, tell us what people will get from the book. What are the kind of key messages that you'd kind of like people to go away with, as well as enjoying your story, because it's really nicely written. It's great fun.
Thank you. I mean, it's just about, I mean, it is my story, I guess, but I try to offer the benefit and insights of my experience as I've gone along. And really, it's like I said at the beginning, it's like understanding that we're all human beings and everyone has the right to feel pain, and everyone will have definitely felt pain. Yeah. And actually, unless you have the confidence to look inwards a bit, and that doesn't mean you suddenly have to trade in your Jack the Lad card. It doesn't mean that you suddenly have to disappear, start wearing no shoes and socks, or disappear to a retreat in Tibet. Unless that's what you want to do, which is also fine. I'm talking directly to my demographic, who I know, because I was like it once as well, will be put off at the idea of talking about their feelings, seeking therapy or help, going to groups, and just not drinking, because they think, oh, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be weird. I don't want to be boring. And my message from this book is, it's not weird. It's not boring. It's very liberating. It's extremely liberating. It gives you, and you don't have to give up everything about your identity. I'm still at the football every week. I'm still having a laugh. I still make people laugh. They still make me laugh. I still have fun, but I've taken away all the bad bits. It's just like that. It's like you can keep the good bits that you want, and you get rid of the bad bits. And guess what? You will suddenly see really clearly what the bad bits are, because you couldn't see it before. You won't believe the amount of things that you currently do that in the cold light of sobriety actually are a rubbish waste of your time.
Totally. You know? Absolutely. I love it. So, and then just tell us a little about, so you've got your Substack where you tell us what you write about on your Substack.
Well, it's called The Reset, and you can find it at samdelaney.substack.com. And it's very much what the book was born out of. In just before lockdown started, I decided to start writing about sobriety and mental health from a kind of bit more of a sort of a blokey point of view. And I did it because I'd written a couple of pieces. I've been a writer journalist my whole career for 26 years, 27 years. And I've written all sorts of different things, but I'd never done much self-reflection. I'd often been preoccupied with trying to make people laugh or telling other people's stories. I'd written a couple of pieces in The Guardian where they'd asked me to touch upon my own sobriety.
Yeah.
And the response I'd got had been enormous and really encouraging. And the main thing that I heard from people was that it was anyone who knew me, they knew my writing, or they'd seen me or heard me on TV or radio. They kind of had this image of me as a non-stop sort of joke a minute sort of a bloke. And they were and the reason me suddenly being a bit more reflective in print about the fact that I gave up drinking, and that was linked to my mental health.
Yeah.
It was just such a surprise. It was a shock. It felt like a bizarre juxtaposition, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, the fact that I am the way I am means that the things I'm saying have extra impact,
Totally.
right? Because I'm the last person you're expecting it from. So I thought, well, that's really great and really powerful. And I also thought, and actually, the more I do it, the better I feel.
Yeah.
So I thought, I'm going to start writing a Substack, because I didn't feel completely comfortable with the writer-editor dynamic when I was writing things that were so personal. Because when you're writing very, very personally, an editor, quite understandably, I've been on that side of the dynamic myself, will have their own agenda or their own
absolutely.
boxes.
And
I think that's fine. I'm a professional writer. I'm fine with that dynamic. But when I'm writing about things that are extremely personal, so I thought I'm going to do it as a newsletter. And it built up quite quickly, and I got quite a few thousand subscribers. And then I started doing a weekly podcast that was linked to it. It's also called The Reset, where I interviewed other interesting guys about their experiences. And I tried to tap into the same sort of, set of experiences, or people who you wouldn't expect to usually talk about. So my first guests were like Shaun Ryder, the pop star, Chris Ryan, SAS soldier, footballers, these kind of guys, undercover cops, guys who were sort of tough guys, lads, this sort of thing, who you wouldn't expect it, and all opening up very honestly.
Yeah.
So it grew, and that's really what the book came from, because I carried on doing it quite consistently. It built an audience, and in the end, it came to the attention of a publisher who thought it would make a good book, and I'm delighted they did, because now it's found a wider audience.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. Thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate you sharing it with us, and I think it's just great, and we haven't even said, but it goes without saying, really, that one of the really great things about this book is that you are bringing out into the open the undeniable link between alcohol and addictions and poor mental health, and it's not talked about enough. It really isn't. I mean, still anyone listening to this podcast knows that I bang on about it the whole time, but certainly with my community, the number of people that sort of rock up to GPs and are given antidepressants but without being asked if they're drinking, it's still going on all the time.
That happened to me. Absolutely.
Did it? Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, when I was taking lots of cocaine, drinking all the time, and taking prescription meds for my mental health all at once.
And nobody ever bothers to ask how that's going to play out. Oh my God.
I did say, I remember going to GP at one point, and it was they do you a checkup when you're 40. I'm 47 now, and so it would have been just a few months before I give up, and I was kind of looking for help, and it was a nurse, and they weigh you in, because they do a big sort of MOT in the NHS when you're 40. And they weighed me, and she said something like, "You weigh 2 stone heavier than the last time we weighed you here, which was X number of years ago." She went, that's bad. And I went to her, yeah, the thing is, she went, why is that? And I said, well, the thing is, I'm really drinking a lot. And she went, are you? And I went, yeah, I think I'm drinking too much. She went, well,
so am I.
No, she just went, well, you better stop then. And that was the end of that.
That's helpful.
I mean, I don't blame her. She's not there she was a nurse. She's not there as an alcohol addiction specialist. But it's like, it's funny because you sort of are sending little signs, but in the build up to me,
no, absolutely, that would have been you actually reaching out for help
and hoping that
from
someone swoop in. But
imagine if she'd have said that. But imagine if she'd have said, "Listen, well, I'm not the person to help you, but you know what? Fantastic that you've noticed that. I'm going to signpost you to someone who can inspire you to stop drinking." That's all she needed to say, right? That's how we need to change it.
We do.
And well done you, because you're raising more awareness of that, so that it's going to be easier for other people to look within and reach out, right? So
I would always say don't try and white knuckle it, because
no, God, no.
I know people quite close to me who I've seen give up drink because they knew it was having a negative impact on their life. And despite me trying to reach out, there's only so much I feel comfortable doing with people, because it's, saying, listen, you need a program. It doesn't necessarily have to be AA or this or that. I'm not prescriptive about what it is, but you need something.
Yeah. Well, you need connection.
You need connection.
Is very, very important.
That's it. You can't just stop and think, well, my life will be exactly the same, just minus alcohol.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't believe that's sustainable.
It's about so much more than just not drinking, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
So I love the book, Sam Delaney, Sort Your Head Out, Mental Health Without All the Bollocks. And you told us about Substack. So thank you so much. I'll put the link in the show notes. And I really appreciate it, Sam. I hope we get to meet at some point. Really nice
I hope
to see
so
you.
too. I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much for being so kind about the book. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
So check out Sam's book. I'll put the link and also the link to his work, his podcast, in the show notes. And you know how to find all of that. You know how to rate and review the podcast, and you know how to find us at thesoberclub.com if you want to check out our events. If you want to sign up for that webinar, what does it mean to be a sober coach? Then again, go to the Sober Club, click on blogs, and you'll find it there. Or you can go to janeleegrace.com and you'll find it there. Or you can just follow me on social media, and you're very welcome to drop me a message. Don't forget, if you've got any guests you'd like to suggest for the podcast, you very welcome to drop me a message. Love to know who you'd like me to interview. I've got a fantastic couple of guests coming up in the next few weeks. One I can share with you. Some are not confirmed, but one guest I can share with you is Pop Buchanan, Sober is Dope. Really looking forward to that. See you next week. Thank you for listening to the Alcohol Free Life podcast, brought to you by the Sober Club. Please rate and review. And if you want support, accountability and inspiration, and you want to live your best life without the booze, check out thesoberclub.com.